Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City code and consulting firm. I'm here today with Chris LaPunzina, who's the Director of Construction at Gordon Properties. Christopher, always
good to see you, Sisto. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. So, little background. I met Chris several years ago, and he was working on a project on the Upper East Side that had an existing parking garage, maintained the garage, built the whole building on top of it, per se.
Correct.
And we had a lot of obstacles with COVID. We had a lot of obstacles in trying to maintain the garage and retain the use of the garage, but a great project, a successful project. I'm sure fully rented today.
Yes, it is. And the garage is full.
And the garage is full. But today, Chris, I asked you to come in because it's been a topic that we haven't talked about on the podcast, but I've been following, which is Local Law 126, that talks about inspecting parking garages. And, you know, we've had a collapse here in New York recently over the last year. There's been collapses in other places like Florida where we see a whole building come down. But the city has put in place that from 59th Street down, that was really the first area that all existing parking lots needed to be inspected by a qualified inspector or company. So if you could tell the audience a little bit about what that really means, what it entails, and tell us, you know, how many garages right now, Gordon actually operates under Myers. So give the audience a little bit of that feel.
So we own and operate 6 garages in Manhattan. 5 of them actually fell within this first cycle of inspections. That was
you didn't mean like fell, you mean they were in that
choice of words,
jurisdiction.
yes. Are located within the first zone of reporting requirements that was due at the end of 2023. So that required us to go through and do a detailed inspection of each facility by a qualified parking structure inspector who has to be certified by the building department, right? So they're
like a special inspector, but they were specific. They were specific to parking garages.
Right. So generally, they're engineers that have experience with garages. That's one of the requirements to be qualified, either design or rehabilitation work. So they have to take a test in terms of qualifications for design and evaluation. They also had to pass part of the test explaining what the rules are under the local law.
Wow.
So a lot of the inspectors got tripped up the first time they took the test because they know all the technical stuff,
but they didn't
know the law, and that was sort of equally important to the building department because they want to know that they're enforcing the law the way that it was intended.
Correct.
Right? So
they're actually, interpreting it the way they wanted it interpreted, because with any law, you can interpret it differently. So, I think that was smart for the building department to say, hey, you may have the engineering part, but this is the interpretation part that we want to make sure you got that part right.
Right. And they're very specific about what they're looking for and how they're reporting it back, right?
Got it.
So especially if they found something unsafe, it was drilled into them. You find anything unsafe, you must report it immediately to the building department.
So take us through that, because obviously you're also an engineer, right? Went to Cornell, came here, got into the construction world, did engineering, construction. You got both sides of it, right? You got the engineering side, but you also got the construction side, and the owner's side as well. So, wear many hats, but really, you have a wide variety of experience. So take me through. You put your hard hat on. You go to one of the garages. They're there and they're walking around. Tell us a little bit. It's visual. They're taking photographs. Are they using infrared? Are they doing test holes? Give us a little bit of a feel of that, because I wondered for myself, with today's technology, what are they really doing? Are they doing a Windsor probe?
Right. So it starts off very low tech with a visual, because you can identify areas of concern pretty quickly with a visual, right? So that's one requirement. The other requirement is sounding. So they have to sound a certain percentage. I believe it's 10% of the area of the garage has to be sounded to verify that you don't have hollow spots or things like that. That will unearth enough issues to address without doing anything with regard to, X-ray or ultrasonic or any other sort of high-tech methods. You might use those as you get into it, but it's not required
Gotcha.
by
So,
the
so
inspection
really, the
process.
high-tech stuff, they look at it visually, and then from there, depending on what you keep discovering, you may have to go to those those other places to say, okay, now we got to assess what the real damage is, and the only way for us to do it is open it up or use these other methods.
It's mostly open it up because you'll find an area that has concern. You'll start to open that. You'll find that it grows. That's
Right.
typically what has happened. You see a small thing visually, start tapping around. Next thing you know, it's 2 or 3 times as big, and you're opening it up and you're finding, what is the real damage, and the engineer is then making recommendations how to make the repairs.
And what's the time? So once they find those reports, they automatically send it to the building department, and you, as the because you're the owner of the structure as well as the operator, right?
Correct.
How quickly do you need to make those repairs, and what is the building department saying? Is it like, hey, this is level 1 immediate, this is level 2, or it's really
Right. So hopefully you're not finding like an emergent situation that requires immediate repair, like shoring and closing an area. That can happen. It has happened in some garages. I mean, I've heard from
and the engineer
engineers
makes that determination?
Yeah, they'll have to immediately report it as an unsafe area, get the shoring in, and close it off
Like a facade.
to keep it safe.
Put the bridge up and automatically say
Very
it's unsafe.
similar to local law 11 facade work. Yeah. The next level, there's really only 3 levels. That's the worst case. The next case scenario is what they call safe with repairs and engineering monitoring, where they say, okay, there are some things that need to be addressed,
But it's
not
safe.
urgent. It's safe. You can continue to operate. We want you to complete the repairs within the next year, or they can give you a longer window than that too.
And the engineer determines
And
that,
the
not the
engineer-
building department.
Correct. Engineer will tell you sort of a time frame. So you can phase the work a little bit, which is helpful. You have limitations, right? In the garages with weather and temperature, you may not be able to do certain types of repairs. In the winter,
Sure.
you might want to wait
To the
till
spring,
better,
right?
warmer temperatures, right?
So you go through this, and so the first thing that I'm getting out of it, and thank you for educating me, and hopefully you're educating the people that tune in, is the engineer and picking the reputable company to do this. There's a lot of liability on that engineer to do the report properly, and that's what I love about some of these laws is that, even though the building department is passing it along because they know they can't do it themselves, is finding qualified people to do the report properly and report that to you as the owner and operator. So here we are. We go through all this, and now you have a garage. This costs money, and having a lot of money because, we're not talking about a new garage. We're talking about structures that have been around a long time. So, for example, some of the structures that I know that I've been at that you guys own and operate by Madison Square Garden, they've been here a long time, and your company has maintained them, which is unfortunate because there are other places within the city limits that people continue to operate, but they just don't have the funding to maintain them. And that's where now these garages are going to get exposed, and rightfully so, because the law is there, right, for a couple of things. One is to protect the people that go there to work every day. One is the people that drive their cars into the lot every day. It's the people that are outside the garages too, because if something happens, it's catastrophic. It's not, you're talking several things. Plus, one of the things that I would like your opinion on is, I've been reading a lot about, where parking garages are, how the building code is changing. One of the things that's changed that we don't really talk too much about is that electric vehicles are a lot heavier than,
Right.
fossil fuel vehicles, whether they're diesel or gas. So tell us a little bit about that, and going to seminars, being in the industry. What, are they going to make you beef up floors in the future? I mean, what are we going to do?
Yeah, right. So that's a good question because the EVs are a concern because of the added weight, right? So now you have structures that are potentially old and have lost capacity over time due to, wear and tear
age.
and age. and you're on top of that adding extra load, right? So it depends on how the garage was designed. You know, for us, our garages were generally all designed above and beyond what code is today, right? 75 pounds per square foot is what they were designed for. Code is 40. So we have
So
a margin
you've
of
almost
safety.
doubled, right? You've almost doubled the capacity.
Right. However, is the 75 really still there? That's
Right.
what gets determined during the process of the inspection
Wow.
and the repairs. So it's not, the law isn't sophisticated enough at this point to say, okay, if you have certain EVs, you should really devalue that loading and take that into account. It's kind of just not addressing that yet. So that's probably going to be something that happens in the future.
It has to be, you know, and, you know, while we were off the air and we were talking about, you know, some of the topics, we started talking about a parking garage and we're like, oh, I hope we have enough material to get through a half hour. And within 5 minutes, we're like, oh my God, we can stay here for 2 hours, right? And that's the beauty of having a podcast and bringing someone like yourself who does this every day. So the next question is, for me, is charging stations. You know, we do charging stations for some companies. And so here we are. Big thing going on right now is condo boards where the tenants are going, well, you don't have any electric charging stations. And they're like, well, we're not mandated by the city. We're not mandated by the state. And by the way, even if we wanted to give them to you, the local utility company can't provide them. So, you know, where is that in the realm of New York City parking garages? Is the state have laws out there now that are either going to pass or they're, you know, up in Albany that are saying, hey, by the way, in the future, you need a certain amount of electric charging stations for your your garages.
So it was just last week that local law 55 was passed by New York City requiring charging stations in new garages, but also retrofitting them into existing structures. And the question, you know, again, I haven't gotten into the nitty gritty of it yet.
Well, it's
but
recent.
What I'm seeing for at least retrofitting is that 20% of the spaces are going to have charges by
That's a lot.
2035.
Right,
But
and
newer garages sooner will have to implement.
Well, that makes sense. But for example, like most of the garages, your consumer affairs licenses for how many vehicles?
It varies. We have licenses from 200 up to 1,600.
Right. So you got 200 cars. Even 20% is 40. It's 40 cars. 40 cars to bring in power, transfer gear, transfer switches. You know, and pipe it all in.
Right.
It's not cheap.
No, the infrastructure isn't there in the garages for that. Never was intended for that.
No.
The law is a little bit ahead of its time, I think, because we don't see the demand for people to charge. People who come into the city now with electric vehicles, they're charging them at home where they don't have to pay an operator who's going to earn a profit on the charging system.
Sure.
Right. So I think it's a ways off before we actually see the need for that. And maybe that's why it was projected out to 2035.
Oh, so it's so 20% is all the way to 2035.
Right.
But they're getting ready for it.
Getting ready. People who live in the city and own a vehicle need a place to charge, but that building we did on 87th Street has 150 spaces, 55 apartments, and there's only maybe a couple people that have had vehicles that need charging. Yeah.
And did you supply it there? Do you have some stations there?
The building was only built 5 years ago, right? And it wasn't really top of mind, so we made provisions to have 4 of them.
What's nowhere better than
near
0?
20%, but yeah, so we can accommodate a couple of people. But it's definitely coming fast.
So here we are. You've gone through this first cycle. So tell us a little bit about, you know, once you got this report and you looked at it, you know, your job, I would guess, not that I know what your job is, but I would guess, because we do some of your filings for your repairs, is the engineer makes these suggestions, and now you got to look at it. Logistically, you got to, you know, you got to figure out how you're going to do the work, how it impacts the people that have monthly spots, daily spots, how it impacts the neighbors and when you can work, how you can work, the weather, when you can do it, how you can't do it, and most importantly, coming up with a budget to say, okay, guys, well, this isn't a $50,000 repair. These are several hundred thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands and maybe even $1 million. It just all depending on the structure. And so how do you put it all together after you get the report? And, you had said earlier in the conversation that it's based on a priority level, but a lot of it is your own priority level, not what the building department demands, unless it's an emergency repair.
Right, right. So first of all of our garages are safe.
Exactly.
That's the important thing, right? That gives us flexibility in how we approach things, right? So when the inspections happened, it was a small window to get these done and get them repaired and report it to the building department, right? So all 5 garages are getting inspected at the same time, and repairs are going on in these garages at the same time. And it's a function of availability of even contractors to do the work, right? So certain work was pushed off until this year just because we didn't have access to the labor. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's reporting at the same time.
And everybody who has a specialty in doing garages.
And the inspectors are all busy.
Of course.
They love this. The contractors are busy. They love this.
Sure.
But for us as an owner, it's difficult. As an owner-operator, we had a little bit of an advantage, right? Because we're familiar with the structures and we've maintained them to some degree over the years, whereas an operator who doesn't own it, they're looking to do as little as possible, right? So those garages probably have more ahead of them than we did.
That's an interesting question because I don't remember if I spoke to you several months ago. I think you and I had a chat about this, and I always said to myself, so who's really responsible for the structure of the garage? Is it the operator who enters into a lease, and when they lease it to the operator, the building owner says, whoa, you own the whole thing, including the structure. So if you got to repair it, it's on you. So does the building department go after the operator? Do they go after the building owner? Your position with Gordon and Myers is a completely different one because you do both.
One and the same, yeah.
Right. So there's a huge advantage to that.
Right.
Because like you said, you can control that. But I was curious when they wrote that law, who really is responsible? Are they going to violate the owner of the building, or are they going to violate the operator? And I always thought it was the owner of the building. They don't care what's in the lease. So I was curious.
I think it goes to the owner. Yeah. But I think a lot of the leases put the onus onto the operator.
Sure, like a triple net.
A triple net lease, basically. So there's going to be conflicts between them arguing over who's responsible for what. And I imagine what condition did the operator get it when they started, and if they are to restore it to a condition that's better than it was to meet the current requirements, or how does that get sorted out, right?
Without a doubt, that seems like that's at the end of that lease, that's a pretty sticky situation. So I always often question, and I don't really have data on it because, as I always try to communicate to the audience, is that I'm a big proponent of laws. I think laws are there, especially in construction. It's to protect the people that work there, live there, walk by it, like we said before. So to me, now they have this local law, and I would be curious to know how many of these parking garage met the deadline. Because, listen, there's always local law 97, there's local law, 6, 7, 10. There's local laws about everything. That doesn't mean that everybody runs out, hires an engineer, and complies. So, I would wonder where they're at right now and how many people actually made the deadline. Because, like you said, availability, cost, all of those must be difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, it was a struggle for us to get to the deadline and actually have the reports in on time. Just because of the constraints, right, on the supply of labor and whatnot.
Sure. And engineers, like you said.
And engineers. But this is anecdotally, I'm hearing this from one of the engineers that's licensed to do this, that at the end of the year, only about 20% of the garages
Well,
that were
and
required
you know what,
to comply actually reported.
And I would guess that sounds about right, because how many of those garages that have those ground leases probably right off the bat started, oh, my attorney's going to call their attorney and we're going to figure out, do I owe this? No, you do. And then the finger pointing starts, and then you already can't get it. And your team was on it. Your team couldn't get engineers, and there was no bickering. You guys had the whole thing in control, and you could barely get it in. So I can only imagine the struggle for everyone else. So, it brings up a valid point. If you want to go to a safe garage, the first thing that I can honestly say is, through Chris, is that if you're in Manhattan and you go to 5 of the 6 that are below 59th Street and you go to a Mario's parking lot, their reports have been completed. So my next question would be, are you required through the city? They have the energy efficient codes, right? You walk past the building, oh, this is an A building, this is a B building. Are you required to post these reports and to let the public know that this garage is safe?
No, there's no posting reporting at this point. That may come. I suspect they will do that because they need to incent garages to get this done.
And make
comply,
people feel
right?
safe, like that, hey, Chris LaPunzina's team filed their reports, and I feel comfortable that I'm going to drive up this parking lot, I'm going to go to the Ranger game, and I'm with my wife and my kids, and this garage isn't going to fall down while I'm in the elevator. I mean, it sounds like a crazy thing, but, it's something that we all start to think about now.
Right. I mean, people pay attention to it for restaurants.
Right.
They may pay attention to it for garages. So it's a
They
valid idea.
mandated that, we tell them that they are an A efficiency building because of carbon neutrality, but we're not going to tell them that, hey, look, I just spent $1 million to fix my parking garage. I think the public should know that I complied and that we are doing the right thing. So there you go.
I agree.
There's a little promo for...
We're going to put up A's.
We're going to put
tomorrow.
up A's. Sisto says this garage gets an A.
Exactly. That's
I
for
love
tomorrow.
It. I love it. I love it. So, Chris, here we are. And this has been, it's a topic that I've really been following for like the last year and a half. I've called you to pick your brain a little bit about it, spoken to other developers about it. So here we are. We're a year later, 2023. We just finished in December of reporting. We're into the spring now of 2024. As we now look forward, the next question is, how often do you have to do this? Is it annual?
Right. So it is annual. It has to be done annually by the qualified parking structure inspector. I cannot do it. It must be licensed and approved for that specific task.
So
it's
December
not
of 2024, so it's going to be similar. I'm sorry to cut you off, but is it similar to like a facade report? You report it. You say what work you're going to do. The engineer says this is what I think should be done. You put it on your plate because you guys are really into this and you have the money to do it. You go, you do it. You report that you did the work. Now, at the end of the year, you get the engineer to come back. They do another test. They go around. If everything's good, you file your report, and hopefully the repairs you did in 2024 will give you a clean bill of health in 25. Then the following year, you're going to do it again, and then again, and again. And
yeah, it's not filed every year.
Okay.
It's required to be kept on file in our office.
Oh, so the city doesn't really get it.
No. But at the end of the cycle, which is 6 years, you'll have to file all of those annual reports.
Got you.
To document
So
that
the
you've done
city
it.
only looks at it once every 6 years, but you're required to do the inspection every year, so that if there is a problem, you catch it before the 6th year.
Correct.
Got you.
And it's a valid way to do it because in 6 years things do continue to
Evolve.
deteriorate, and you could have a problem that you didn't have in the year one.
And
of the
things
cycle,
evolve.
right?
Things change.
Right.
Process changes. Things change. So as you're going through this and you've gotten your reports, what is the biggest thing? Just the concrete has just lost its strength. The rebar is thinned out a little bit.
Yeah, because of all the de-icing salts, basically, the concrete continues to corrode. And if you have steel, rebar, or we have steel encased in concrete in a lot of places, as that is subjected to the salts, it causes the concrete
Corrosion,
to crack. And you can see that, right? So this year it may look fine. 2 years from now, you may notice new cracking and spalling that you have to take care of.
Got it. So on the show, my good friend Andrew Peters from Curry and Brown, he was one of the pioneers on the show at the very beginning. And his job is he does cost estimating. And everyone wants to know, how much does it cost? Why does it cost more? How do you project this? And he doesn't have a set of plans. He just goes and meets with a guy like Chris, and Chris says, look, I got a parking garage. It's, 300,000 square feet. We think we have 10,000 square feet of bad concrete. We got to chop it. How much is it per square foot? And he gives you a guess. He doesn't know. He just knows numbers, and he projects this. And his famous saying is, everybody wants to look in the rearview mirror and go, but we only paid $12 last year. Why am I paying $13 now? But his job is to understand inflation, acceleration, and all these things, and be able to project in the future. So I always ask all the guests, instead of looking in the rearview mirror, we're going to look forward. Where do you see local law 126 going? And how do you think it's going to affect cost? Because I think right now, I park a lot. I come from Connecticut. I go around from customer to customer, spend a lot of time in Manhattan, and I'm going to get hit with congestive pricing. I'm going to get hit with 2 tolls on my way in. I'm going to get hit with $70 in Midtown for an hour and a half to stop and say hello to Chris down by the Gray Bar building. And that's what New York has become. But you have it on the other side. So give us a little forecast about what you're seeing. Are there going to be more cars or are there going to be less? Is it going to cost more or is it going to cost less? But now, other factors come into play. So give us a couple of those factors.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to predict because there are a lot of variables that are happening, right? So how much parking is going to be affected by congestion pricing is still a question mark, right? There are people who are coming in no matter what. There are some who will say, there will some who will find alternate means and maybe not need to park. So hard to say how that's going to play out. I mean, it's definitely downward pressure on pricing, right? You're dealing with all of these repairs, which are very costly to implement. Upcoming implementation of EV chargers, that's going to be a big cost. So our costs are going up. So can we raise prices to cover those costs, or is this downward pressure from
Right, and then
lower volume?
I'm assuming, I always look at the prices there, and I always look at how much the city gets for parking tax. Forget congestive, tax.
Right.
There's parking tax there that it's not 8.65%, right?
No, much higher.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. And then also you had touched on something earlier that I didn't know about, which is minimum wage. So tell the audience a little bit about that, because we hear about that like in the restaurant world. So tell us what that correlation is in the parking garage world.
Yeah, it was actually very similar to restaurant workers in that, they were paid less than minimum wage and they were making up the difference in tips. When minimum wage was passed, everybody in the parking business had to be paid minimum wage, and they're still making tips, so they're overall better off. However, that's another cost for us to absorb and then eventually pass back on to people who are parking, right?
Right.
Because everybody is subjected to that.
So we take hopefully still plenty of cars that need to park, but if they're not, there's not as many cars. There is a lot more money to be spent, which you were doing anyway, which was to maintain the garages, but now it's at a different level because it's mandatory and it's treated a different way. Right. It's not that you weren't spending it before. You may have spent it over 7 years instead of 3 years. Now you may spend it faster, right? And then the next part of it is it costs more to run it. The taxes are higher, so you start looking at it, and now we'll take it into my world. So we have these 5 properties. Hey, Chris, what else can we do with them? And I'm sure that prior to COVID, I'm sure there were thoughts of, well, we have these great pieces of property. They could be awesome office buildings. They could be residential. So I know the city of yes is coming. Eric Adams is talking about it a lot, about rezoning and things like that. And believe it or not, 5 prime pieces of property in below 59th Street in Manhattan could be repurposed, because eventually maybe they could put parking garages out of business, in my opinion.
Right. Well, I mean, even before all of this, your experience in expediting for all these buildings, a lot of parking garages and lots disappeared, right?
Oh, 100%.
So you had, pressure on the number of spaces, which is driving up prices. You're going to have it, if it's as it gets more difficult to operate cost-wise, it's just going to incent that to happen.
Right.
And, there's other things going on with zoning, like this new MX district where they're going to allow these conversions from commercial to residential.
Right.
And they're going to waive the requirement for parking.
Right.
So, okay, are you going to have more spaces because people are living and parking, or less because the commercial now has gone away and
Right.
become resident? Hard to say where that's all going, but overall pressure on parking garages is increasing and making it harder.
Oh, I think so.
If prices can't go up, then yeah, people.
Well, how much more? How much? Look, for us, we're in business. We run around and we do it. But my wife and I love to go to the theater. We come from Connecticut, and many times we'll go and we'll park. And you get there, it's crazy to get in the lot, crazy to get out of the lot, and then when you get the ticket, you go, holy moly! Between the two tickets for the show, the parking and the dinner, it's $1,000 night for two of us, and that's common. And so I don't know how sustainable that really is. And it's not because of parking. It's just then add the $15 on top of that. Then add the tolls on top, and all of a sudden we keep adding and adding and adding, and here we are. So. As always, I thank you for coming on, Chris. This is really, really educational. And part of it is that you get to come back and you get to tell us next year, after you file the 2024 inspections, or you get your inspections, you can come back and tell us about this whole experience and what it was like for your company to do this work and see the progress and understand the law a little differently, because from now to next year, things are going to change, and the city may change, and it could bring some differences to what we're perceiving now versus what we're going to see later.
I'm sure it will change. It continues to change on a very quick pace. So, but thank you for having me, and good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'll be back.
I know you will. And just remember, if you want to go to a safe parking garage, not that others aren't safe, but we know that the Myers lots are because of Chris and his team. I think that is a great thing. Keep up the great work and make sure your buildings are safe for everyone.
We will. Thank you.
Chris, thank you.